My last race and ethic relations class yesterday, this final exam week. I leave next Wednesday for Canada for 2.5 months sabbatical.
Wow.
So
Take us with you.
it'll be nice. Kelowna, Swim Lake, Alberta, and down in Peru. But this is huge, very heartfelt. I'll get it myself. I don't know how I'm gonna handle this. So you will read that this church is in the book. So when we were down to the final little bits last May, after 22 separate peer reviews, I lost count of how many edits and shifts, and just so privileged or cursed by the many eminent scholars who've been at this thing because they saw what it is. Let's make it better, let's make it better, let's make it better. We'll talk a little bit about that. But the key person, sorry. As you will read in the preface, which I was told by our chief editor, when he called me on his phone, I thought we're breaking all sorts of protocols. You're not allowed to talk to your editors, and certainly not the chief editor of your series. You're not a distance delivery. There's a whole protocol to this. He calls me because he knew I was working on the preface, sitting in the waiting areas of Memorial Sloan Kettering. And I was in the struggle as the last 2 years of this book, and the grit and the guts of trying to put it together was eminently as Cheryl was passing away. And he said, you've got to put it up. She hadn't passed at the time. He said, you've got to tell the story. So I encourage you, as your first pass, look for the Episcopalians in Westchester. People in this church took on to pray for us. She didn't get here much, but she couldn't. You saw her a couple of times, and of course, you can visit her out here. She was finished the book. In her only short way, I'm tired of it. But it was breathed while she's teaching full-time in Bayside, Queens. And I launched from there to the different libraries around there and into the other neighborhoods. Hollis chapter, it exists because she's teaching this one morning. I said, well, I'm taking off then. Because I also had never heard about Hollis, Queens, but our chief consultant for Southeast Queens, Jimmy Rokoya, rest in peace. He passed away from a stroke in February. You would have been introduced to him at the celebration of life here, the African-American gentleman who spoke. He's inherently in this book, loads of, sad he's not seeing the huge influence he had on Southeast Queens, but he's the one says you can't talk Queens without Hollis. Those of you who know anything about this, it's the root of consumer hip hop, is Hollis, Queens, runs DMZ and all the rest. He said Bronx can take creds, and then of course Jarrell, the other gentleman on our team, maybe perhaps one day he'll be able to speak about being black in NYC and how complex that is. It's not one monolith, it's huge, interesting micros that he's, as a Harlem-raised Southern black dad to a St. Kitts Caribbean mom, where St. Kitts is more St. Kitts out in Queens than is it in Queens, South in this whole thing. Because it's the little islands now. We're not Jamaican, we're not Trinidadian, we're not Haitian, we're not DR, we're for St. Kitts, Grenadines, Barbados. Nevis has its own little, anyways, it's a whole story about this and that. So, he says Hollis is where the whole consumer hip hop was birthed. And so we visited that and had several ethnographers actually go there. What's fascinating, let's give you a few precursors. When you get the book and you see the Hollis thing, there's 14 micro charismatic, predominantly, they're not Pentecostal say, but they're very Pentecostally charismatic. But even if you're Seventh Day, you're charismatic. If you're Baptist, you're charismatic. They're all, because they vibe the Afro-Caribbean beat in everything they do, but they're not Spanish at all. It's this whole vibe to it, and it was from young kids whose parents were going to these churches in the 1970s. Run DMZ guys talk about this. We took it from church and started performing in the yard across the street in their school, where they still have people the cardboard and breakdancing as 60-year-olds, like they're still reliving their 70s. Of course, that's in the book, all the difference. And yes, there is a Haitian charismatic. We still don't know what denomination because they never say. They're all independent. Alongside mainline Presbyterian, Episcopal, UMC, in this cluster. Who knew hip hop was birthed in churches? I didn't. And we think it's a gang thing, but the thing that went worldwide was consumer hip hop, which came out of these middle class Afro-Caribbean churches. So that kind of sets the tone for us about the book. So read about the preface. That I think is the biggest story at the end of the day, and helped to be nurtured by our senior editor, or not senior, the series editor. So the book was picked up early by Fordham University Press. Fred Nachbar is a senior editor. They brought it to the board of directors, and they said, this is something we have to publish. So they beat NYU Press to the thing. I think it fits better with Fordham, because they had a whole Polis series, which is a kind of interdisciplinary series that studies cities. So they didn't see this, and we didn't deliberately put this as a religious book, but it certainly is religious driven. That's Daniel Monti, who you'll see here and there. He's the series editor, and I'm really honored that he is. Originally from New Jersey, but now professor at St. Louis University, and really wrote the book on a sociology book on American history in the late 1990s. He knows American cities better than anybody else, sociologically. And it was a real honor, after I think the second iteration, after this had been smashed and bashed and diced, when he felt ready to put it to the next hit. This is going to be a fine book. He said it the other day, and he's going to meet us in St. Louis, or in Denver, for one of the academic releases of the Scientific Study of Religion National Conference, where he was going to serve on the Author Meets Critics team, and quizzes, which is a whole academic kind of thing. So I'm highly honored that first him, and then we're very honored that the first endorser that came out of the chute that shocked me was Ibu Patel, who's the president of Interfaith America. He's the guy in academic circles on interfaith movements and studying how it is. And he's right early on seeing this is a critical book for us to try and understand this 2026 phenomenon, which we'll talk about in a bit. And then I couldn't believe Omar McDougall came in to endorse. I'm just talking just so people can make sense of it. I couldn't figure out Hollis. I couldn't figure out storefronts to some degree, and I've been a sociologist for 20 years now, and I've been an urban ministry guy for 40. Been in charitable choice, been in all this stuff. Can't quite figure out why is there no food kitchens, pantries, community development centers that are open during the middle of the week. Like, this is so counterintuitive. You should be opening your church to the community. Omar Roberts wrote the distinguished book in 2005 on urban churches in America, and essentially out of these 5 corners crushed the idea of charitable choice, which what that means is government funding of urban recovery efforts, charitable, which messes a lot. Basically, he said they closed their churches because they do it insular. You see this, that they don't go out, they go in. And it's counterintuitive to government people who want more votes, which is spread the food across everybody so everybody can see our community development center. And yet, as one of our other peer reviewers said from Dallas, was say how there was a community development center that was funded by the government in the full complex in this block, and then there was an inner city church. Which one do you think was full of people? It was the inner city church. So what we knew early on is micros are the new trend. So let's get to it. The title Micro City came to us in trying to figure out a term that captures this. My colleague, Richard Semino, he is a sociology of religion expert, teaches in SUNY. I'm the urban sociology guy. I bring in years of church and urban mission and ministry stuff to practitioner stuff to the mix that he doesn't have. That's kind of a blend of it. So Richard went to Germany after we had said, well, let's try something different. I worked on a different project that he had. He's a journalist for many years. And we met in grad school 15 years ago. He said, Hans, let's work on a book about New York. And so we said, what are we going to write about? And every grad student who comes to go to Columbia U or NYU writes about Brooklyn, hipster Brooklyn. And so there's so much written about Brooklyn, and either the bad Brooklyn or the good Brooklyn or the hipster Brooklyn. Everybody wants Brooklyn because it's the coolest place. As was stated in 2011, the most hipster neighborhood on the planet is North Williamsburg. We know this. Of course, the Bronx carries with it the weight of the Bronx is burning. And the stereotyping of Bronx, which is really heartfelt for me with a number of my Hispanic pastors that I know there that are clearly not gang members, but they stereotype the Bronx this way. It's being written left and right because that's really compelling for a grad student to come in and write about that. Manhattan is Manhattan. It's tourist zone, and most tours, you have to know Manhattan. But nobody writes about Queens.
I don't know.
It's a fascinating thought.
It's certainly a world unto itself. It really is, in a lot of ways.
It's a city, what it is. Let's not forget, it's a city of 2.5 million people is what it is. So call it what it is. Brooklyn is 3 million. Queens is just nudging it at 2.5. So why does no one look at this? And as a sociologist, and me certainly as an urban minister, I know we lived in Astoria for years. That's when we grew up, came to New York. And I knew from the Astoria perspective, the complexity even of Astoria with its 250,000 people in that neighborhood, which is the size of a small city somewhere else. And yet this expands all the way out to Far Rock and goes on and on to JFK, but nobody takes this on. And so we wondered about this. First of all, it doesn't have the buzz for grad students because what, you've got to take the train way out there. But the second thing is it's so expansive and complex, it's too hard to take on. But we said, let's give her a go. And I said, we have to start in Elmhurst, Queens. I knew this from the past. Roosevelt Station, on the international line, as they call it, number 7 time, you drop down to the surface, you now are in the most diverse section on the planet. It's a mishmash. It is not a salad. It is not a melting pot. All of Alba's stuff from the 1990s, throw it out the door. It is something else going on there because they are all very much functioning in subgroups. There's 120 languages we found out at the elementary school, first languages at the elementary school. Think about that, first languages. So most kids are functioning in ESL. That's the common factor is the ESL, but the home factor is y'all speak different languages. You don't get that anywhere else. Second is, we found out Elmhurst Hospital itself, home of the largest tragic spot during COVID anywhere, has 11 simultaneous paid translator at the emergency ward. So at any time, you can come in and get instant translation because they come in and out. This is something different. And thus, we started investigating in the early tests, what is this phenomenon? Because it is not classic diversity. It is not pluralism. It is not. So call it what it is. We like utopian ideas of it just isn't. And so in one of our early tests, I leveled one of our ethnographers. We had about 80 ethnographers, ethnos, culture, graphos, writing. So we had a trained team of about 80. I was the lead investigator, coordinated about 80 people who were actually getting into the microbes across the city. I remember this one Indian gentleman, and this just captures it so well. He said, I'm standing here in a pizza lineup at Roosevelt, and there's 20 of us going to get our slice. And next door is the sari shop, and next to that is the jewelry shop, and I know that's for the brides from my culture. So you have the pizza shop, which is the thing we all stand in line. Next door is my people's, where they're going to go get their bridal gear. And he says a fascinating thing is in this lineup, there's no one of the same ethnicity in the pizza lineup. So there's something centering about the city, but also it spreads it in its own peculiar kind of way. So Rich sent to work on the theoretical models for this, and that's where microcity emerged from Europe. The German architects, anybody like architects? Architects are designers, and most recent iteration from 2010 on is they're looking at micro habitats of how to build small mass producible places for certain places where the world is living in poverty, or another part of this micro movement is apartment gardens. So basically you maximize the use of space. So that's the micro city in architecture. And so he brings this back along with another term that a German philosopher, sociologist, social analyst was talking about, called super diversity. Really important term. This will mess with you because it's still messing with me, and it's going to mess with all our colleagues in academia who've been preaching pluralism for a generation, and that we're all coming together. And there's a kind of a utopian idea about it. Super diversity, a situation where there is no majority because it's so diverse. What happens in super diversity? Super diversity is Elmhurst, Queens. It is so diverse. There's black, white, Hispanic. We know that. The grand 1965 U.S. immigration tags that said all Hispanics are Hispanic. Where we know your Puerto Rican is not Dominican, is not Cuban, and certainly is not from Lima City or Lima up in the hillside. At least 21 separate subcultures within the term Hispanic, but the American government has to kind of put you in a pot, which makes it really complex. By the way, for Black Dominican students of mine, are we Hispanic or are we Black? What are we? This is the complexities of these types. Or in our project in Little Guyana, I have Indian features, so I don't fit in the Black clergy groups. One of our clergy was saying, but am I Indian or am I Guyanese? Because Guyanese are not Indian, but we look like them. And especially if we're from a Hindi background, and even predominantly the Hindi shift to Pentecostal. So when you're Pentecostal, it's very Hindi style dance even. So are we Indian or are we Guyanese? But to the average person, well, you all look the same. Thus, this becomes really, really important for us to think about super diversity. So I said, I got an idea, Rich. This is the micro-city. It doesn't exist in our vocab. So I said, let's tease them out. Because they're micros and it's a city. does this work? So let's get to some of the key pieces. The book, we had to choose neighborhoods. We did not choose Forest Hills. I think probably because if you're going to take on Forest Hills, you're taking on a significant Jewish,
Correct.
which in and of itself is extremely complex between Orthodox, Hasidic, Reformed, secular, and we couldn't fit everything in. And also they're not anymore, as much as you like to think, in Queens, not a significant influence overall in Queens. Indeed, and where they used to dominate way out in Bayside, they've now moved up to Long Island. We didn't do that. Flushing has been written about extensively in another book that came out in 2016, so let's leave that. We're picking up the Asian piece in Bayside and Whitestone. So then we went across the whole borough. If we're going to be legitimate in covering the whole thing, that's where we picked the 12 neighborhoods that you see in this book, which takes you across a cultural journey. What was the approach? There's no possible way this face, as Swedish as I am with my big cheeks, could ever access some of the data that we needed. And so we creatively thought, how can we build a team of people who are culturally specific to a micro and that can get in there, be trained as researchers, but also, as we call them, be social actors, going to church like it's their church, because it is their church, but they're actually watching it with the third eye, which means, yes, I'm here, third eye. So we trained about 80, my students are predominantly one classroom grad, so I'm functionally grad students, and also some professional researchers and key consultants from each one of the neighborhoods, the community members. And as you go through it, we did two pieces. One of them is obviously sociology of religion, where we interviewed directly about 120 different congregations across the plethora from Christian to Catholic Christian, charismatic Christian. The Episcopals are in there, and as well in Sunnyside, I believe. Black churches. Fascinating piece also that we have about, certainly if you're going to address Elmhurst, you're addressing Little India. And so we have a few things on temples and that kind of things. And of course, Little Guyana with this plethora of temples and charismatic churches, storefronts on Liberty Avenue. So we sent researchers into all these venues both to interview and observe and talk to congregation members and to the lead church leaders themselves. Often you don't get the best stuff from the pastor, priest, imam. They give you a front. We were like one of our Greek Orthodox priests. Everyone here gets along. We're all one in Christ, and yet I know next door is the mosque. Actually, yes, you get along, but there's a fence, because the Greek is very cultural, and the Muslim is very, or that particularly Egyptian Muslim is very cultural to itself, right in Astoria. So we knew that we had to get in behind some of this. I stopped counting the thousands of pages of data that comes back, because each person had to write journalistically about all of these things. I bashed along with Richard the data that was coming back. Fordham by this time is right in on this project, because they're seeing now what's being looked at here has never been done in this way before. So we have I think our last pieces of data collection here would be 2025. So it says contemporary take on super diversity, or the diversity pluralism movement, as you can get. That's where we know in higher ed it's going to challenge some of the stereotypes that have been out there and the ways we want to believe, which predominantly comes out of the 1970s post-secular, or not post-Christian diversity, utopian interfaith movement, which I'm not against at all. But the reality is, as a good sociologist, as much as we have all this, what do people do? What do groups of people do? What is the everyday, or as the French call it, the habitus. What is it they do just habitually without thinking? Because that's where the real sociology takes place. So the implications of what I'm going to talk about is going to make you think, because I'm just going to say it, this church reflects this just as much as any. Because if it's true there, it'll be true there, it'll be true there. It'll be true. Here's some of the core theoretical models. Interaction rituals comes to us from Collins in 2005. What interaction rituals are is, what do we do when we interact? And we have interaction models. We get together to do different things. This is an interaction moment around your tables. And what Collins studied and said is, as people interact, they make a social decision about the emotions of it, or what we call the emotional impact of that event. Whether you were angry, whether you were happy, or you were nonchalant about it. If you're nonchalant, you're likely not to come back. If you're angry and you like that anger, you'll go back to it. That's a protest. We got together and we fought something, right? Or, I had a great time with those people and we had great beer. I want to go back to that same bar. Or we had a great time at church. The worship was awesome. I like the people. We're going to go back to that. That's what's called the emotional impact. What he argues is this begins emotional entrainment. It's like a train. And what happens, your IR creates all these boxcars. If it's a train that's moving in this direction, if I created my culture, what emotional entrainment does is it deepens your commitment to that specific thing. So if you enjoy this dinner, the food was good, the interaction was likely, you're going to come back next time. And next time. And next time. See what happens? You add boxcars. And the longer this goes on, the deeper the train goes, the more committed, the deeper you are in it. And that starts to what? Take your time. So what's happening in Queens, when you leave your country, very well depicted by one of the, he's from Guyana, and he'd come to the United States planting a church, actually. He used to be the superintendent of schools in Guyana. Decided he wanted to come to America, not to build a fortune or anything, just because he felt called to do this, to be with his people that were all moving to the United States. So he plants this thing, and the people start liking coming to his congregation, but it's the same people all the time. So the idea of evangelism it just adds boxcars to it if it's the people that fit where the train is going. So this creates a phenomenon that is not new. The Greeks talked about this. This was reiterated in church planting out of Fuller Seminary in the 70s. What was called the homogeneous unit principle. What homogeneous is? Same. People are drawn to people of sameness. I like to more plainly call it this way. People like to be with people like themselves. You like the conversations. You like the drinks. You like the sports. You like the church. And you're drawn into this. What becomes inherently complex about this, if you are the car out here, it's really hard to latch on to that train. And thus we have what the French call the anomie, from where we get the term anonymity. I'm lost. I didn't know I was a budding sociologist back in the 1980s, but I wrote a song called Alone in the Crowd, which its catchline was, alone in a crowd, what a tragic place to feel like a stranger. And so strangeness happens if you can't find the boxcar or the train to link onto. And when it's like a train central in it, and you can't find it, what do? You become anonymous. Now, there's a whole group of people who like the anonymity, and they start going to large churches and this kind of thing. I'm very well about that. But at its base root, this phenomenon we saw was very, very real in Queens. That same pastor I just talked to you about, they went to Flushing, and his congregation members were asking, where are our people? I mean, Flushing is a huge part, but what are they seeing? They're seeing this is a Hispanic enclave playing soccer and all that. Our people, the Guyanese with a very Indian take to it, are not here. So do we belong in this? Do they belong in Flushing? Weird, right? So this is a phenomenon. Okay, that gets us so far. Let's go next. Heterogeneity, difference, breeds homogeneity. This is going to bend a lot of my colleagues' minds. Heterogeneity does not make me more diverse and inclusive. In Queens, and we reckon to think elsewhere, it makes you smaller, not bigger. Because this is the phenomenon we saw. If heterogeneity is what we call my externals, where I'm looking out at the neighborhood and I'm looking out at the pizza joint, I live my life in there. We ride the subway, we walk the sidewalks, we go to school, we speak English at the school, even though there's 120 languages or whatever language it is in that neighborhood. This is what we do. We exist within this, what we call public space, as is being written about a lot. And that's where we seem to want everybody to be, is in this public space of all integrations. I don't still to this day, at one point, I got to get into a deeper and deeper study about what Apostle Paul was thinking when he goes, we are all one in Christ, neither slave nor free, nor male nor female. Are you just lying to us? Because in Greek society, this was as alive as it is now. People are different, and they are drawn to people of sameness, which makes it really hard to think about in some of these theological terms, which I can get into at some other time, not today. But this book profiles it sociologically very clearly, and this is what happens. When I'm in super diversity, so we'll say super diversity plane, where everything around me is different, it's new, I go internal, into homogeneity. This is fascinating to think about in congregational terms, because we're in a congregation here. Of course, storefront churches do this. Hollis has all of this all over it. Why is there 14 of them? Because they all want the worship in their particular style of Afro-Caribbean worship. It all could sound kind of hip-hop, hoppish together, but it's not. And it's not even a language. It's a Jamaican way. It's a Trinidadian way, or it's a St. Kitts way. The people go internal, and look for their own kind and celebrate it. So much so, one of my colleagues, Jarrell Burney, who studied this, he's their St. Kitts worker, out in St. Albans, Queens. There are these folks who are all Afro-Caribbean, all from different islands, small islands, because he was already perceiving this from his mother. They go small. They're not from Harlem, and they're not into, and he very clearly, when he's taught in my classes, talks about being black in New York is not Harlem. Harlem is Southern-based, deep history. The huge voting base is Southeast Queens. That's where the numbers are. Caribbean-based, most of them educated, and those that are moving up in education, you can usually trace them from families from the British education system. But here he says, in St. Albans, there's backyards. He calls it backyard faith, where he profiles it 5 kinds of fish, all from the same Caribbean Ocean, and we all prepared our own little different ways. So because they're in a church storefront, they don't have this kind of space. They'll go to someone's house, set up the barbecues after church and fellowship, and as you know, in anything about these cultures, Sunday doesn't end at noon. It goes on to 3, 4, and then maybe we'll go back and do something more. It's a full day event. And he said, here they are having these friendly competitions, whether Barbadian fish or whether, let's say, Nevis fish is better. and the friendly small island competition, which creates this pan-Afro-Caribbean small island mentality in Queens. They've gone internal, right? So community development then, we term the coin cloistered community development, which means a cloister, of course, we know this from St. John the Divine, we go sit in the cloisters, an evensong, and I love doing that Sundays at 4, just sitting up there like this with God and the organ. It's either the organ or God or one or the other, because I'm an organ guy, as you know. All due respect to the choir. Choir is good too, but it's the organ. You're looking up there. I'm all cloistered. So cloistered community development then means I work inside my church, inside my temple, inside my mosque, and that's who we feed. We feed our own kind. We don't necessarily think out. So it breeds this homogeneic internal cloistered community development where you'll see in the inner city neighborhood, everything is closed, but it's all happening behind where they've drawn it down. It messes with all my concepts of community development, but I have to accept the fact that this is true. It's not a truism. It is what people do. So we feed our people. So thus we have this internal. Works in another interesting way. One of our ethnographers, I love this little story. She was out there on the edges of Lefferts Boulevard, and she studied, this is in the book. After so many years, it made it into the book as a key for Southeast Queens. And she was a kind of a 30-something African-American woman, obviously Caribbean rooted. And she's out there on Lefferts Boulevard, out on the far reaches of Queens. And we told them to look for microbes. What are microbes you see? And she noticed, only in New York, there's this bench on the traffic island. You've seen this, right? When there's a traffic island, that isn't a traffic island, that is now real estate. And so they had put grass on there, they had a bench, and they had plants in the middle of the intersection. And she noticed these 3 gentlemen, Caribbeans, sitting on this bench every day. Every day. She said, well, I'm going to befriend them, because she's going to mess with them, just being their friend. Of course, healthy distance, because they're older and younger, but of course they really enjoyed this. And then in her final analysis, she said, well, what happens is they're sitting in this one little place, and what makes them be there? Well, their church was just there, like a block and a half away. Their sports club where they go watch the cricket, and yes, now NFL and NBA is over there. And their diner that they go to is over here. And she said, in the whole 3-month analysis, their whole world existed around 3 blocks. In Southeast Queens, you're in a borough of 8.5 million, a city of 8.5 million. You're in a tri-state of 18.5 million, and you exist within a little 3-block cluster. Thus, anomie isn't anomie, it's 3 people sitting on a bench, enjoying each other's company every day, like habitu, like a habit. So this has tremendous implications on the way we understand the city and how we minister in the city. If this is true, which it is, we saw it not only there, but many other indications. How now can you move into this space? And there are some movements that we came across that are certainly an interfaith movement that was birthed in Harlem, is trying to address this in some of the church storefronts. And what they're doing is they're constructing a community kitchen in some of the storefront congregations and paying for it because the churches can't afford it themselves. And so the guy next door will come and cook the food and then march it over to their people and walk down the road and march it over. There's a commercial kitchen. And it's a conglomerate of Presbyterians, Anglicans, Methodist, called soup, something or other. So that's how you can address this social phenomenon. and possibly one way we come into it. So heterogeneity breeds homogeneity. IR, interaction rituals, creates emotional entrainment, puts me in a train of emotions, and the more I repeat it, the more I feel close and intimate with it, and the less likely I am to what? Go out. So, of course, this, I think when we get into the clergy trainings and stuff on this, we'll really have to have an analysis and understanding. What do you do if your congregation has become so beautifully insular, which is what people do? They want to feel home, which came up many times. It feels like home, right? So you don't want to crush that, but how now can you reach the neighborhood in other kinds of ways? Becomes the implications that the book is certainly going to challenge. Besides its broader takes on pluralism and diversity, in as Patel says, these divided times, people look for sameness in politics and everything like that. What else? Lots I could say. I'm just going to do a couple of vignettes to get you a little taste of it. This one relates to the idea of habitu, which is the French word for my habitual behavior, my consistent behavior. So she was Indian, and there is in Flushing a large Indian temple, which is kind of a go-to place for people to come through New York. The larger one is now in New Jersey, but still making a pilgrimage because of its deep history in Flushing is this temple. Congregation about 1,200, but it changes regularly. And she was now about, I'd say she was probably 35, had 2 kids, lovely young woman, young mom, and clearly New York accenting and stuff. She's second gen, fully immersed in being a New Yorker and being at City University of New York and all this kind of stuff. So that she said, I'll take this on because I want to study our temple. And lots of things you could look at. Things you don't get in public is the pictures from inside the temple. Part of our task was for them to shoot photos. And so here she brings into the presentation a lovely staircase, marble staircase going downstairs with brass railings like you're in some very fancy hotel. And I guess the idea in the Hindi worship is after worship, you go down these steps to the food being served. And of course, there's family day, and each family, as an act of their worship to the gods, will put on the buffet along with the priests and managers of the temple. And I understand it's supposedly incredibly great food. And it's an open invitation for anyone, just like coffee hour here, to come after congregation, to be down there. And of course, tourists will come down, or not even tourists, but visitors and some of the folks. She had a very aha moment, along with one of her girlfriends. They both had grown up in the temple. Said, what we do, I've never gone down there. It's free food and everything. I've never gone down there. As if we went out the door across the street. Now figure this out. And we line up at the bodega across the street where the Mexican guy is cooking Indian food, and we'll stand in the bodega lineup waiting to pay money. And she said, if it's raining, snowing, sunny, we'll be out there, me and my girlfriends, in a lineup with our kids. Why would we do this? And they took a whole semester to try and figure out, why are we doing this? Because it doesn't make logical sense. The sense would be to go downstairs. So there's something that they were trying to understand. Is this New York calling us to stand the bodega as Indians? Is it an assimilation factor? Is it a habit? What is it? But what it is that it is what it is. It's what we do, and we still do it. Which becomes compelling to think about this model. Heterogeneity breeds homogeneity, but it breeds others who are, I don't really fit the homo. I don't really fit the hetero. I'm bridge crossing, as Sandercock calls it, which makes it a fascinating thing to think about New Yorkers, particularly second gen. So that's a fascinating story. You got the Lefferts Boulevard. story. The other one I'm going to take to you, which is Hispanic. But no, not Hispanic. Corona, Queens, very complex Spanish-speaking neighborhood. And it is not the Puerto Ricans from the Bronx deciding everything, or the Dominicans from Washington Heights that have migrated out across the city 30 years ago. Now we have not only the undocumented they funneled in Long Island City, but they go hang out in Corona because it's Spanish speaking, but also immigrants that are legal immigrants, or what you call paper immigrants. There's different terms, or I'll call them paper immigrants. I'm not gonna stereotype legal, illegal. Undocumented versus paper immigrants. All in the same congregation, Our Lady of Sorrows Catholic Church. Did you know? I didn't. I've been in this city a number of years. I mean, did you know this? Who else has grown up in New York? What is the largest congregation, Catholic congregation in New York City? Not St. Pat's? No idea?
No.
I had no idea that Our Lady of Sorrows in Corona, Queens, is the largest Catholic church in the Brooklyn diocese. Over 17,000 members going in and out of 11 masses, cycling like it's a conveyor belt through this. And it was very, very, very hard to speak to any of the church leadership because they're very protective for good reasons, because there's paper and unpapered immigrants or migrants, whatever you want to call it, in their congregation. And they're very much have intense lines. But if you were to go to Mass on Sunday, there is not this. They have big fences they put up, no food or vendors on the premises. Your bikes must be parked outside. So think of here, now we're fencing the whole thing in, and you get in the one little gate like you're going to an event at MetLife Stadium to get into Our Lady of Sorrows, and once it's full, it's full. You'll have to get the next Mass or the next Mass, and almost all of them are in Spanish. But what we found, I was there once, my sidelight, I looked down when I'm looking in my pew, oh, there's someone who's scraped in a star gang symbol right there. Oh, I'm sitting where there's been a gang member sitting here in church. That's peculiar. I snapped a picture of it. All right, so they have that. But what that as well as St. Bartholomew, same effect here in Elmhurst, is they're in these mass diverse Spanish-speaking congregations where the Mass brings them together. And of course, Our Lady of Sorrows has got very much a Latin tilt to it, almost a Latin syncretism that they've worked on and how the Mass is done, and they'll celebrate festivals from the different countries. But as the priest and one of the congregants said, we all sit with our own people. So these little clusters. And what do you do when you get out? You go to your restaurants, or you go to the food vendors who are sitting there waiting for the business right outside these fences. So it goes from this macro to a micro that quickly, but even the Mass brings you together, but it also separates you because you can be here and be free, and you can worship that. Roberto Chia, one of our ethnographers, really pictured this. He's Peruvian, from Lima, grew up in Lima. But he said there's a vast difference in the worship style between somebody from the city in Lima and somebody from the mountains above Lima. It's not that far apart, but the way they do their worship. So the ones in the mountain, very syncretistic on kind of ancient rituals and on Azteca and other Peruvian rituals. Down in the city, they're more oriented kind of Western way of doing Catholicism. So here at Our Lady of Sorrows, you get this effect, people finding the entrainment, they keep coming back because it's sort of done, but then they go to the restaurants after the fact. So this is a fascinating story about that. And there's many other versions of this type of thing from small congregations to congregations. I trust when you go through the book, you'll fit one of three groups for sure, but then maybe the fourth group that one of our they send these out to other readers after the fact. But the first group is obviously for grad students and for college students and professors, which gets to the sophisticated kind of analysis. You just go past some of that if you wish, or if you want to learn, you'll learn. Some of this is there. The second group is clearly some of you, which is what we call professional trade. Ministers, clergy, community development people, those who are aspiring in leadership, some very serious questions in a good way to consider out of the book. How does this now adjust even to this congregation? What can we learn from Queens, from this phenomenon? That's the second group. Fordham believes those two groups are primed for this. And the third one also is this group, which is why I was interested in doing this, is what they call interested readers. Particularly people who are interested about things about New York and want to read about Queens for the first time. This is an not entry level, it's a higher level read for those of you who are that. Maybe you're the fourth group that was never put together by the marketing group, but I love what when one of the endorsers talked to me, said, I think it's a toilet reader. Okay, what does that mean? No, he said, you do it. I said, I've tried it and I do it because it's thick, right? It's 340 pages. He has it in his bathroom. He said, you just open the page, and we deliberately wrote it as a number of, that's ethnography, little short stories you can open anywhere. Oh, let's read about this neighborhood. Oh, good. I learned something while I was sitting here. Just don't sit there for a few hours because everybody else is going to be wanting to get in there as well. But we appreciate the ability for me to chit chat here with you. There's lots to say, obviously. But I try to give you a little bit of a sense of what this is about. Because this is one of my home congregations, what we're doing here today, this is the other cool thing. This is book launch week. It was launched globally last week in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And your t-shirts are running all over Canada now. I had one of my colleagues up there say, yeah, on the third day of the conference, everybody was here. This, by the way, is an actual mural that was painted by an organization called Thrive Collective, which does murals for inner city kids in New York, and including many in Queens. And so I had the idea.
Where's the mural?
It is going to be revealed in Richmond Hill.
In
Richmond Hill, so they haven't done the I think will be in October, is what they're doing. This was the original. If I had it here, it'd be cool. We put it up here. We had it stretched to mural size, which will fill your whole wall. But what this is an artistic depiction from their team of the book. About 6 different consultations we had, and so I love the fact we had a Queens design cover. Fordham thought this was really cool for an academic book, and of course they branded it with what we said, Micro City. And maybe it'll launch the Micro City movement, which is people are interested in investigating this, especially something I'm really interested in, people talking to one another. How do we learn to talk? There's some speechifying we have to. And I know this is a professor, you have to learn how to say things across. Yes?
No, you're not.
You have to learn how to say things. So thing I'm looking at is with my colleague from, one of our new colleagues, that was one of my former students, she's now in Fort Worth, micro-appreciation. How do you do micro-appreciation as an antidote or a counter to micro-oppression? Or microaggression. Instead of always looking for the aggression, why we're not doing the appreciation side, which comes to us from those weird business people. You know this. When we did the original, what WTF was not the what the. It was CEOs walk the floor. Get out of your offices and walk the neighborhoods.
That sounds like restorative justice.
Yeah, sure. Sure. But the main thing I'm at is, so if we know this is true, how now can we enter into conversations with people? What are leading lines of things? How do we talk to one another? How do we provide empathy in our talk? How do we appreciate people for what they are, not based on our own judgments? Because we all bring our own habitude to the table. I do. And what can we do? So that's kind of a movement thing as well. If you're interested, we'll put the final throws together for the New York academic release. which will be Saturday, August 8th, at the New Yorker Hotel, in association with the Association for Sociology and Religion. And there'll be a Saturday conference with about 8 workshops, amongst many others they do. And our first author meets critics will be there. What that is Rich and I put on to not defend, but explain the book in front of those who've read it deeply. So it'd be great to see some of you that. The official Queen's launch moved from this coming week to October 17th, Saturday, Richmond Hill, Queens. That's when there'll be the ribbon cutting of the mural, as they're adding other pieces to it. And maybe that'll even be a gala launch if there's enough interest in the book. What I've done here today, because this is all launch, it's my church. If you want a book, take one, and then make a nice, generous contribution to this church. So I'm not taking nothing out of this today. If you want a shirt, want to rep it, because those book launch shirts, most of them are gone now. He's got one on.
Oh,
It's actually nice and soft.
Looks great.
So we have a few of them there. I have a few more at home, but not a lot. Most of them are going to be going on sabbatical with me. Make a donation to that as well, and to help support this congregation the best way we can. So thrilled we could get this in under the book launch thing. Those of you who have other friends or don't have one there, another important piece here is this is time dated. But what Fordham has done is on the book launch week, you'll see it here, the QR code for other people. You can hand these out to your friends or whatever. They've put on a 25% discount on orders within book launch. This expires 6/30/26, so the end of June. These will be valid. So give these to your friends. Say, I was at this presentation. We ought to have a book reading club. You ought to have coffees over this, because you could extend this thing for numbers of weeks. And don't even pick chapters, just pick themes if you want. So that's how you'll access them in the broader market. So feel free to take as many of these as you want. Or if you just want a cool picture of the mural, you can do that as well. And you'll see the other things that we're tooling up. The street walk, street week, story shop, and book tour and conferences. Street walk is a one-day walking tour through our sites. The street week will be a week-long project where we combine with doing some mission stuff as well as there within the congregation, not only congregations, just restaurants and all that kind of stuff. Story shop, which I already talked about, which is the learning how to talk to one another, being driven by Dr. Beth Lucy Spadell. And book tour, this is kind of one of the launch things.
And your team has dispersed?
Yes, yeah, so give you a essence of the team. Rich and I are here, obviously. The other people of our team are New York-based, Yasmin Rodriguez. She's co-authored the Corona chapter. She's executive director of Once Upon a Time Community Center in Richmond, which is where we'll do the launch in October. Brilliant speaker. Her session that she does is called Salvation Through Salsa, where her rediscovery as a Nuyorican. Do I tell my 3-year-old kid, my kids, daughters, do I raise them more Puerto Rican, or do I raise them as ballerinas? Because she's a dancer. So this fascinating journey through Nuyorican-ness in Corona, which is very not Nuyorican, but is Nuyorican. So that's her. Jarrell Burney, New Jersey. He's with our team. He was the key consultant for Being Black. You already heard a bit about him. His session he does is the 5 kinds of fish, but he also does another one on being black in New York, giving the contrasts of the essences of that, and a lot of it about colorism and color of or blackness determines a lot of the outcomes. Third member of our team, Reverend Steve Coolish, Assemblies of God minister in Southeast Queens and other places. Every Sunday, he's in one of the storefronts that are charismatic in Queens, delivering food, speaking, worshiping. I've known him longer than any of these people. So that's Steve Coolish. And other people that are coming on the team, Dave Solano, Bayside, Catholic, Italian, Greek Orthodox. he really gets into the shifts politically of Bayside, which at one point was the center of the New York City, New York State, and the National Democrat Party. And what are they doing now that they don't have power anymore? Once Crowley lost, that power base that used to meet at Jack's Steakhouse no longer has the power it used to. It's now moved to Southeast Queens. Thus, the power people in New York will have gone through the whole plethora of, you'll read about in the book, it's pretty complex, about black clergy groups and fellowshipping in black clergy groups. But we think that LNAME and Christian Cultural Center, the mass churches have all the power. No, it's these storefronts that bring out the vote. And it functions in black clergy groups, and they have all this tremendous interesting. So that's Dave Solano. And people that are moving into the team, Micro City Philadelphia will be presented for the first time at ASR with David Brown, who's a professor at Temple, and he's looking at this now. How does this apply there? Beth Lucy already told you about. She's looking at it in Dallas, Fort Worth, starting with homeless ministry that's being done in the Fort Worth region. So she'll be coming in not only with the micro appreciation take, but also how does this work? Connie Oswald in Denver. So when we go to Denver, we'll see Micro City Denver for the first time. So she's now taking this book and looking in small spaces in Denver. So how does Denver apply some of the truths that you hear here today? And of course, I have to go to my hometown. Anthony Yako, we'll see if he makes it here to ASR, but he will be in Denver, and I'll see him this summer, Micro City Vancouver, which I know is going to have a very Asian take to it, South Asian, East Asian take, and how do you actually, he's a strong church planner there, and how do you now do that in the context of Vancouver? Never mind that we were released in Canada, so it's all across Canada, and they were in the shirts. And wherever else the Lord would lead.
Toronto would be cool, right?
Toronto's cool. I'm biased. I think Vancouver's far more compelling.
Yeah.
Toronto, as I say, this is not, it is disparaging the Leafs. They got the #1 pick from the Canucks. We hate the Leafs. We had the one chance. I'm talking NHL, for those who don't know.
Yes.
In the NHL draft, we had the worst record, and we didn't even get the #1. That's just Canuck heads. But what I was going to say was Toronto, I always call Little New York. Anything that happens in Toronto actually already happened in Queens. So I don't find it compelling as a study, but definitely compelling to go up and try to unpack their Torontonianness, who believes in, it's kind of disparaging, but it's a very Canadian truism that Toronto is the center of the universe. Vancouver is Asian central, which makes it really interesting.
In the last few decades, not.
Yeah, Vancouver, 1986, but it keeps evolving.
Yeah.
What it is now. I haven't lived in Vancouver for 25 years. I've stayed in touch. You know, Cheryl said, you gotta leave Vancouver. You gotta leave. I couldn't leave 10 years ago. Finally leave. Have I left yet? He says I can't shake it out of, course, we're on sabbatical in one part of Vancouver to see that, which is very similar to Seattle in some ways. Yes.
Absolutely an extraordinary, hopefully final antidote to the archaic notion of the melting pot. It's really fabulous. But I am curious, I have relatives, I'm a Brooklyn and Manhattan girl myself, but I have relatives who lived in Queens. They lived in Howard Beach. It's a very different kind of.
Gangsta enclave.
Oh, yeah, well, among other things. And I'm just wondering, you know, and also politically, unbelievably conservative, but where some of it, but largely immigrant driven, both working class and Jewish and Italian primarily, and now just starting to change. It's sort of another side of Queens.
It is profiled, that side of it. You'll see an interesting chapter. We had to deal with LGBTQ, which isn't active everywhere, but it's very active in other neighborhoods. So it's very active, for example, in Sunnyside, Queens, one of the real centers of the LGBTQ movement. And so Rich had a real good idea, is to take the St. Patrick's Day parade. And you'll see a tale of two parades, the St. Patrick's Day for All parade in Sunnyside, Queens, which is largely driven by an LGBTQ community that is not even connected to the Catholic Church in which it represents, compared to Bell Harbor, right across the water and just out from Howard Beach, where it's the enclave of when it was supposed to be this great beach community that never happened. And of course, now it's predominantly Irish and Jewish. And that's where all the police officers and firefighters, and they all live out there. And the St. Patrick's Day Queens, somehow, the Queens St. Patrick's Day parade is held way out there, which reflects everything Howard Beach about it, which is very homogeneous, it's very white, it's very Irish, and all this comes out. That even the funny thing, the Church on the Rock, charismatic church that's there, also has to celebrate some sort of Irishness to get in the parade. So that's very much part of the phenomenon. Howard Beach being a little bit more Italian, but we do have a Howard Beach story, is Jarrell Burney, our key consultant, worked in a motorcycle shop. That's a Howard Beach motorcycle shop. In the book, you'll find this little, where he says, we're all working together, the motorcycle becomes the kind of thing we talk about, we don't even see color. So one of these cross venues, and that's Howard Beach. So we appreciate that you can't stereotype Howard Beach just as where John Gotti was. But that is still there. That's why it's very safe and the police don't need to come in there as much. Of course, part of its geography. Any other questions, comments?
Just want to thank you for this wonderful presentation. Just say that for me, it's like a continuous flashback of seeing all these memories of Long Island, quote unquote, but Queens and all the surrounding communities. I just want to say really quickly, one of the things that crossed my mind, I went to Forest Hills High School, 5,000 kids, we graduated with 1,300 other people, all different kinds of, but mostly predominantly Jewish, okay? Simon and Garfunkel went to that school, and one of the songs that I was thinking of was Goodbye Rosie, Queen of Corona.
Oh, right.
The other song you said was sing, when I think of all the crap I learned in high school, it's a wonder I can even think of all. And I think it's fascinating too, is that Paul Simon has gone on to look at those kind of micro communities around the world and look at the music that's, in all these different places. And people just keep saying, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Because he's really into this. He really understands this concept.
You can't just go upstate to New York State of Mind. As other famous New York songwriter. In the previous generation of the melting pot. I'm not going to throw out the melting pot.
No.
There is certain people that melt, right? And assimilation theory, those who don't know what that is over time, the theory is within certain, by third, maybe fourth generation, you become just kind of an adaptive version of it. So kind of the previous era of this was, you know what a New York accent, right? You got it, forget about it, right? I hate to try to imitate it, but it's a combination of Italian, Jewish, and Irish, that accenting, and because that was the kind of way. Of course, the Nuyorican influence now is touching that, so there's some sort of melting now with the 1.5 million Hispanics that are influencing the deep culture of New York. But when you come to New York, it's not a Latin city like LA, dominated by more Mexican. New York is a bit of a mishmash, but you got to address the Latin piece of it, and there is a melting to a degree that I'm with you too. It's kind of it's archaic in the sense of the idea of we're all going to come together, which was the assimilation model.
Well, it was a homogenization. That model for that several generations of immigrants was actually the notion of assimilating and becoming American. And I remember, as a very young child, my grandmother only spoke Italian. I would only speak to us in Italian because she was afraid we were going to lose it, because her children all my aunts and uncles, they didn't want to be identified as Italian immigrants. They wanted to be Americans, whatever that was. And that caused an enormous amount of damage, I think. And I think it's it just seems so much more wonderful that we're not just acknowledging this wide band of cultural differences, but allowing them all to flower and not think that it has to be, it's not homogenized milk, it's not everybody becoming the same. We can celebrate all of our cultures.
It's the third generation, the second generation is in denial. The third generation is looking for that,
Yeah.
those roots and that
Right.
information,
Right.
so there's this resurgence that, we
Yeah,
didn't
that's
have
Yasmin's
growing up.
actual,
I didn't have it growing up.
that's Yasmin's actual talk about, the salvation through salsa, rediscovering the Puerto Ricanness through dance.
Yeah.
And of course, that then
And they're
guided-
comfortable with it.
Yeah, well, she wasn't, because that forces her into, and you'd appreciate this, into the Afro-Caribbean history. Because it's Hispanic, we're influenced by the slave
Yeah.
pattern for over centuries, become so enlivened, and, I'm from PR, right, that's it, but no, you're influenced, like, how she's vividly talks about the Latin dance that is like this. And she goes, well, why do we do that? Because in the sugarcane fields, they were on shackles, and it created a dance where they don't move their feet, they move their hips. And what's this stuff? Machetes. So she says that Latin dance like this is very much while working in the fields. It's very social justice, it's very freedom oriented. And she talked about this as opposed to when girls who are taking ballet want to pull up their neck and be like this and lift their toes. It's counter to go low. And of course, it's also to be protected because somebody's coming through the bush. So what do I teach my girls? To be down, flatten their feet and move like this? Or do I teach them ballet? Proper dance. These are the puppets.
Thank you for this wonderful colored map. As I was reading, the one thing that I felt I was lacking was a better map, and I can understand for pricing reasons it wouldn't be in the book, but it helps a great deal, and I would promote the map as an accompaniment to the book.
There's a map for each chapter, and there's one generalized map in the introduction.
Yeah.
That's what we could do space-wise. So on map, interesting discussion was one of the respondents, he said, literally said, the Queensborough president better get onto this now. And if they're not, they're stupid. And the politicians, and this is why exactly your thing, he said, what you have here, and he's a professional academic, he's an anthropologist, he said, this will not be done again. Because it's not in the interest of a grad student or a tenure track person to work that period of time. He said, what you have, you need to have the city put up a map online, and then you click on the map, like you go on Google and travel through the stories of the book on an electronic map. So that's what the agenda hopefully will be. We're all with you with that.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your
Looking at it in filming. Okay,
So David Smith, sorry, David Brown.
Yeah, we